Well, I didn't learn any of this stuff that Mike tells us on the podcast in church. So there must be some secret plot to keep this from me. My pastor doesn't want me to know this. Again, chances are very good that your pastor's never heard of a lot of this stuff anyway.
New Creation Coaching asks, when did the Second Temple literature start influencing evangelical seminaries?
Yeah, I would say if you went to seminary, definitely from the 80s onward, but I would be willing to go back to the 70s onward. If you're in seminary in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and of course moving forward, you're going to be taught New Testament introduction and book studies, various New Testament book studies, with material from the Dead Sea Scrolls incorporated into those courses, and things like the Septuagint incorporated into those courses. Now, you could still get that stuff, but you have to realize what an MDiv is, what a pastor's degree is. An MDiv program is designed to be a mile wide and an inch deep. The job of the MDiv program is to get the pastoral candidate exposed to all the things he or she needs to be exposed to so that they can continue in their development while they're working in a local church vocationally. So you're going to get a little bit of New Testament. You're going to get a little bit of Old Testament. You're going to take a year or two of Greek. You're going to take a year or two of Hebrew. You're going to take a year or two of systematic theology. Your collective schedule is going to be filled up by all of the departments within a seminary getting their pound of flesh from you. Every department in a seminary, from Christian Ed through New Testament through systematic, every department is going to insist that every student take a certain number of credit hours in their department. And that leaves very little room for electives on an MDiv level. So your seminary might offer a course in Second Temple literature. It might offer a course in Septuagint, using the Septuagint as interpretation. But you'll never get it because you have to choose that as an elective. It's not part of your training. If you go beyond the MDiv to a THM or a doctoral level, then you would get it. So the fact that older pastors don't talk the way we're talking here about the Bible, I'm not surprised about that at all. Chances are they got through seminary and never had any of it. And when they're out in the ministry, the average person in their church isn't asking them what they think about the Septuagint. It just doesn't happen. They have loads and loads of practical concerns that are heaped upon them as pastors. A lot of their time is taken up with counseling and business to run the church, business matters. If you're training for the pastorate and think that the pastorate is about, I'm going to spend 40 hours a week studying my Bible now, forget it, get out. Okay, if that's your expectation, leave now. That is not what happens in the pastorate, and it's not what a pastoral degree prepares you to do. It just isn't. This is the MDiv for a seminarian who's going to be a pastorate is a first degree in theology. That's why it used to be called a Bachelor of Divinity. But Yale University actually changed that. They're the ones who changed calling a seminary degree another bachelor's degree because it just was kind of demeaning. And they began to call it a Master of Divinity. And then everybody else just caught on with that. And Yale did that in the 1800s. So it's been a long time. The circumstances are a little bit different now because even your required courses are going to be taught by evangelical professors, we'll say, we'll just keep this within the evangelical orbit, who have gone to graduate schools and been forced to do ancient Near Eastern studies, and they've been forced to do Second Temple studies. And more of that information is going to trickle down into the required classes that everyone is required to take. So the greater exposure to the faculty by virtue of where they went to graduate school, it'll filter down so that if you went to seminary, like I said, in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s for sure, you're going to be getting more of this stuff, exposed to more of it as a regular seminarian than you would have 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm. My comments about that, my professors have told me that it usually takes 50 years of material from the seminaries to eventually propagate into the lay person or lay area.
That's fair. That's fair. That's not pie in the sky.
And also say, I think also because most folk in seminary, even mine, are more concerned about getting the degree so they can be ordained at the church or denomination.
Yeah, that's also fair.
And with the age of information, that causes a problem because a lot of young Christians get exposed to, I don't know, the documentary hypothesis, and the pastor have
Mhm.
no idea what he's talking about.
Yeah, there is that problem of people that never sit under professors in any form. And they're sort of just thrown to the wolves, without them knowing it. They're not only thrown to the wolves, they go galloping to the wolves without ever knowing it, without ever being aware of it. And it's a two-edged sword. Technology is always a two-edged sword. On the one hand, we have access to so much information, and it's wonderful. Again, if we have some guidance, in how to use it and what it means. But if we're just out there by ourselves, we have no way of knowing how to vet the material that we run into. You need mentors. You need people who've sort of been there, done that. With all this material, and your professors are supposed to be that person. Who can help you. Understand what's being said, what's not being said. Why is it being said this way and not another way? They can help you navigate what's going on in any particular viewpoint or any particular area of study. And so if you don't have that, I think it contributes to the conspiracy culture that unfortunately I see, and I'm sure you're all aware of it. This creeping suspicion that, well, I didn't learn any of this stuff that Mike tells us on the podcast in church, so there must be some secret plot to keep this from me. Or my pastor doesn't want me to know this. He knows all this, but he doesn't want me to know it. He's sheltering me from my Bible. He's keeping me from the knowledge of the Bible. And again, chances are very good that your pastor's never heard of a lot of this stuff anyway. And you shouldn't treat the situation as though it's a grand conspiracy against you. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of people pastoring churches today never even go to seminary. And that's unfortunate because you learn a lot in seminary. You learn a lot even at the MDiv level. You got to decide from that point, am I going to stop here? Is this sufficient for what the Lord's called me to do or not? When you graduate from seminary, in theory, you should have the tools to go on and continue to teach yourself. Lord willing, you'll have the time that your ministry isn't going to be 30, 35, 40 hours of counseling people. This is why a lot of churches and a lot of pastoral ministries will say, most of our counseling should be done over the pulpit in what we teach on a Sunday morning. And they're not being lazy by saying that there's actually something to that, giving people scripture, applying it to their lives on a corporate level, rather than spending your entire week with every individual in the church. I mean, logistically, it just doesn't work. But pastors are in a tough spot, just with their workload, the way their workload is determined for them. They often don't have the luxury of doing Bible stuff. As crazy as that sounds, they often do not have the luxury of putting lots of time into Bible.